Thank you. In case, for those who don't know, I just found out when I woke up this morning that I was actually giving a talk. So here's my slide deck. Can someone kill the video? Let me just introduce myself first. I think this will put this in some interesting context. So I was born in 1963 in Atlanta, Georgia. And for those who don't know, Atlanta in 1963 was in Georgia, which is a Jim Crow state. Which meant that segregation was legal. Also in 1963, Asian immigration was illegal. There was a law passed in 1896 which prohibited increased immigration from Asian countries. And so my parents had no clear legal path to becoming citizens until the law was repealed in 1968. Okay. I grew up in Ohio in an all-white community. We were the only minority family. And then I was lucky enough to move to New York, which was my lifelong dream, in 1985. And since then, and I look at the span of my life, in America we've seen the changes in civil rights. We have seen the changes in women's rights. We've seen gay rights. And we nearly got gender equality. And in the last election, we saw this ugly underbelly of America try to turn the clock back to the way it was when I was born. And so I began to think, well, what can we do? So we have to think about what values do we protect in America. I've come to think of America as a place where social progress should be part of what America stands for. The second thing is, in the wake of the federal government pulling back from regulating things that we care about, can the state step in to resist the actions by Washington? And the third thing is, can we continue to make progress in the areas that we care about? So it's very heartening to actually see the presentations that have come before, because so many of the things that you folks have worked on are things that my life has touched upon. I helped start the New York tech community with the venture capital conference that launched in 1998. I sold my first .com company in 2000. I have worked in government since 1990, and actually in the legal field, although I'm not a lawyer. I started an incubator in a large law firm, Greenberg Traurig, and ran that for 3.5 years. And then today I have started or co-founded approximately 15 tech startups, primarily focused on the enterprise space, helping workers achieve higher satisfaction in their work lives, serving people like child welfare, children, and victims. So I'm really proud to be here, and thank you very much. So let me explain just very quickly what the problem is. For those of you who are not American, you're familiar with the US Constitution. And actually, for those of you who are American, that's probably the only Constitution you actually know. The US Constitution is actually a philosophical document that sets the principles of values in the United States. But every state also has their own constitution. And every state's constitution is actually more like constitutions that you might find, say, in the European Union, which are more prescriptive about the values and the laws, and actually direct the legislature and the government to create laws that support the Constitution. In New York, and actually so how do you actually change the Constitution? In many states, like California, voters can do ballot petitions and create initiatives to amend their constitution, which go in front of voters on a regular basis. In 14 states, the only way to amend the Constitution is to call for a constitutional convention. And this means that you vote yes on a constitutional convention, then people run for delegate, and then out of the convention, recommendations are made, and those get put in front of voters. In New York State, the convention vote happens only once every 20 years. The last time New York has actually revisited its constitution is in 1968. And through a bunch of Machiavellian maneuvers, it was voted down by the people because the people who ran the convention didn't want change to happen. The last time the Constitution was substantially amended in New York was in 1937. And most of the Constitution was written in 1894. So we look back at history and what was the United States like? Who was here? Who ran the government? Who had the power structure? And so the Constitution that exists today represents those values, and it has become increasingly anti-democratic in terms of how we vote, in terms of who gets to run for office, in terms of the funding for people who are in office. So New York, as the result, has the distinction of being the most corrupt state in the country as measured by convictions of elected officials. And it is also the #1 state in the country in terms of low voter turnout, which reflects how people really feel. So we are starting actually a new movement called Sanctuary State that is using the lessons drawn from the internet to harness people to become active to achieve a yes vote. And by doing so, have people visualize what a new New York would be, help people understand what the convention process would look like, to demystify it, to encourage people to run for delegate next year, and then to bring all of this back into a social viral curve that will hopefully get us to a yes vote in November. So there are 3 things that you guys can do to really help. #1 is spread the word. I and my colleagues are happy to come talk to any group about the Constitutional Convention and why it's important. The second thing is that we are in the process of getting people, actual citizens, to give their suggestions on what the Constitution should have. We are going to need legal volunteers to help take some of those suggestions and put them in a constitutional framework. And the third thing is we need money. We are an all-volunteer group, and we are working against a very, very well-funded opposition who goes from state to state in these 14 states, opposing the Constitutional Convention vote to achieve a no, and they've been remarkably successful so far. So with that, thank you very much. It's really been great to be here. If you have any questions, please come find me over lunch.